Spencer, thanks for joining me. How are you and how is everything going?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Dom. I hope you and the family are well in a very difficult time, of course. So, yeah, we're one day at a time. But yeah, it's not easy, and I'm sure it's a lot harder for others. But yeah, no, we're moving on.
Good. Obviously, the announcement about the curtailment of our season. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that was fairly inevitable. Obviously, I've been quite vocal about. I didn't think the season should have probably started. Ultimately, really don't take any pleasure in being right. We always expected a second wave, and we just didn't know what the second wave was going to be, and we hoped it was going to be a very small second wave, and sadly, it was a very large second wave with the variant of the virus. So the priority is that everybody is safe and well. That's the absolute biggest one. We keep hearing some very sad stories, and I think it's important that we always step back and realise how big a situation the world is in. But ultimately, football must quite rightly take a step back, and the season was to be no more. So I don't think the Alliance Leagues really have done a bad job. Ultimately, if you look as well at what's happened at the level above, I mean, that's sadly a bit of a fiasco for so many different reasons. But I have great sympathy for everybody involved. It's a complete one-off, this scenario, a very difficult situation for everybody. Everybody's trying to look after themselves, which I totally understand. It's tough times, and it's very difficult to get decisions right. You certainly will never please everybody. And we're just delighted at the moment that, as far as we know, everybody's safe and well, and the club's still there. And when we're all able to go back, we're all buzzing to get back. Once this vaccine rollout continues, and touch wood, it doesn't. Nothing detracts from that, and we can all move forward successfully and put it behind us.
Of course, there's quite a lot of debate going on at the moment, but what are your thoughts on how next season will look?
Well, to me, that the priority is that we don't have a third, almost whatever you want to call it, whether it's curtailment, null and void. I mean, I think ultimately they'll be the same thing. It's important that rules are set up before balls are kicked competitively. You can't change the rules as you go along. Everyone needs to know where they stand before we start. And I was a big advocate of that. It wasn't adhered to before the start of this season, and therefore we are where we are. So I think it's very important that we take this large period of off season and prepare with this experience behind us. And now, not easy again. There are lots of different views, but I think, sadly, we will have some form of restrictions next season. And I think I heard the chief medical officer say there will be some forms of restrictions, social distancing to a degree, whether we'll be allowed full crowds, the secondary spends. And it's right that we prepare correctly, that we don't lose another season. Now, there are obviously lots of different routes to that. And I think ultimately it's the FA that needs to drive that, and whether or not that's anywhere near their top of the priorities is very doubtful. But it's important we don't just go, right, let's just carry on again. Let's get to the middle of August and start playing. And, we could end up losing another season. So I think it's important we realise there will be restrictions and we plan accordingly. And next year, I think it's important that we give ourselves the opportunity to play as much football as we can, safely, of course, but the season will end. I've read reports that I think it's the Project Restart and non-league, I think which was excellent, about promoting some sides. I think we'd all like to see some new teams in different levels. Nobody's getting relegated. Let's try and be positive and forward thinking. I mean, the Southern League is one of the toughest leagues geographically, and I think that needs to be looked at for this next year at least, and just play the local games first. And if we get to halfway point and everything's going well, touch wood, please God, then we can carry on with the distance games in the second half of the season. But if they're not, then we've only played half the season, and we can then play playoffs against the other geographical area for the promotions, the relegations, etc. So we can get that season done. And of course, the most important thing to that is that We're saving time, money, safety being the priority with the travelling, the social distancing. So there are so many different things, and I hope that the powers that be are looking at them and not just going to brush it under the carpet a little bit. It's very easy just to go null and void and we start again. So, the opportunity to do a huge rejig is there. Will that happen? Unlikely. They're still talking about restructure of steps 4 to 6, I think it is. So I hope we can be really positive about it, grab the opportunity and make sure that when we do start, that we can have a plan to finish that everybody knows about on day one. Farnborough took a decision before a ball was kicked that we didn't think the season was going to carry on. We never thought, we weren't even sure it was going to start. So thankfully, we got it right, but we take no pleasure in that. The priority has always been safety. And it's for our players, our supporters, our volunteers, the opposition. And first and foremost is health, and then we move forward from there. So let's keep fingers crossed. We've probably got at least another 5 months of non-activity here. So we have got time to come up with suggestions, but you're never going to please everybody. As you can see in the national leagues at the moment. I mean, it's a full-on Armageddon, and whether or not they should have all that money, was it 10, 11 million was given out to them, and now they've stopped, and some clubs want to carry on, some don't. Obviously, everybody's looking after themselves, and I understand that. I understand that better than anybody, but I think ultimately it would be good if we all step back sometimes and just go, hang on a minute. We're only just under the peak in hospitals admissions at the moment of where we were under the first original peak. We've still got some way to go. And football's a massive part of our lives, but it pales into insignificance to what's going on. As I said, I'm hearing some personal, very sad stories that, it brings it home. This is a really horrible time. So I just urge people to realise that as much as they're fighting their corner for football, and crikey, I miss it like mad, these are still some really tough times, and there's some real, really sad stories out there. And we've got to get through this, and then we can all get back onto that pitch, kicking lumps out of each other and fighting for promotions and relegations and enjoying what we love best, but with this hopefully behind us.
For ourselves, how are the players? Have you been in contact with them?
A little bit. We have a WhatsApp group, more before and around Christmas, and there's not really an awful lot to say. We're not going to have them training or Zoom training, or for what purpose? And we're not abusing the furlough system. I think we have 2 players with a grand total of about £100 a week between the two on that. We've cut our cloth accordingly. We want the players to stay safe. Obviously, I'd love them to stay fit, but it's such a huge off season. I mean, if you realise a normal off season is pretty much May and June, the players predominantly are back around the 1st of July, and we start normally in the middle of August. So we've already had whatever that is, 3-4 months off already. So we've had a double off season. Obviously, we had a longer off season the season before that, and we've still probably got another 4 or 5 months to go. So, there's a few players I've spoken to quite a lot for different reasons, trying to help any way we can. A couple of players came to me and said, could they try and get other clubs when they thought that step 2 would carry on? And we just said yes. I mean, I haven't left Farnborough, but, they're giving it a go or looking at abroad. At the moment, we're just literally saying, stay safe. If you need us, we're here. And, we'll be in touch when we know something more definite. I mean, there have been opportunities just in the last few days since Boris Johnson gave his roadmap of, would we like to play in some tournaments potentially in April or May? I think it's extremely unlikely. And we have to deal with the pitch. But even if you don't do that, the crowds at the moment aren't allowed back until I think it's May the 17th. We don't have the money to pay players in arguably a worthless tournament. It would be a kickabout, really. A lot of our players come from the London area, so it's going to cost them to come. We all want to be playing football, and for our mental state, our physical state, of course, for the players. But realistically, I think it's unlikely. We'll potentially come back early. Well, we would come back early to whenever we think pre-season is going to start, and love to do a more local pre-season tournament or something really early to get the fans back engaged, get the players back engaged. I had a really good chat with Millers the other day at Hartley Whitney. You know, we'd love to do something. I've spoken to a number of managers, but it's got to be at the right time, and there's got to be a benefit for you know, to us, for the players. Just playing a arguably meaningless friendly, I don't think that's worth that. So, you know, we'll probably come back early and really try and hit the ground really positively and with big smiles on our faces when this is behind us. Realistically, when is that? June, July, August? I don't know. You know, we'll wait on everybody else, but we're trying to keep in touch with the players as best they can, and they know where we are. And we've always prided ourselves on our man management. We can't get it right all the time, but they know where we are, and if they need help, we will try and help.
We had a number of supporters donate their refunds from their season tickets to the club this week. Big thank you must go out to them. It's
amazing. I mean, what did we play? I don't know. Probably played 3-4 home games. I mean, it's, as I said, there are times when you feel very humble. This last week has been particularly difficult for me, but it's more me thanking supporters, volunteers, other people in football than what I'm thinking right now, because you're hearing some stories like that, supporters that have had pretty much no value for those season tickets, who have given back to the club. The club is reliant, I think it's roughly 70% of our income comes from events, the clubhouse, the concerts, the fireworks, the cup finals, which have now been cancelled for the whole year. And most of the finals, etc., will now be cancelled, and the concerts for this next year. So we're just massively restricted, but Rob and his colleagues have done an amazing job. I mean, I was down at the ground with you this morning. First time I've been there for, I don't know how long, 3 months, is it? And it's quite humbling to see 7 or 8 volunteers there and see the work that they've done, whether it's painting, digging holes, putting together electricity, bits and pieces, cabling, running along. And it shows you what a club it is. And it's not just the 11, 16, 18 football players that we put on the pitch, you know, over the weeks. The community that loves that club. And that's for all clubs. I'm sure it is. You know, they've all got their own volunteers. And it's very humbling. And it was a real breath of fresh air after a very difficult week. And then you see about the season tickets as well. And you realise just how important football is. And we're desperate. You know, it's really quite bizarre being at the ground today after so long. You know, I've hardly been out. I've been to one game. I've watched a ton of games on the internet, particularly the Conference South. And, you know, I go to the hospitals and the post office, and that's about it. And it is very humbling. And when you hear other stories about football and loss and what people are losing and giving up, and it's quite amazing when you see that. And it just makes you all the more excited and proud to want to come back to, you know, to get playing football again and putting smiles on people's faces and looking at the bigger picture. So when you see people arguing and demanding this and wanting that, and, you know, you tend to think, hang on a minute, you know, they're going to look back in history at this, behind the 2 world wars, sadly. We are going through a staggering time. And yeah, very humbling today, very, very humbling. And massive thanks again to those supporters. Some won't be able to afford to do that, of course, and we absolutely, you know, the club, I'm sure, will look after them. And, you know, but it's just an amazing gesture. And then the volunteers, what they're doing as well. I mean, so for their mental state as well and physical state, it's really quite humbling. And, you know, I will say, I know the club will make some announcements in a few weeks, but they've done some incredible work down there these last few months. And not just the volunteers, but the board members, Rob, etc., what they're going to announce and what they're going to show people. Work has continued, you know, it has continued in very, very difficult times. So that there are, in terrible times, some positives to come through this, and we're still there. And, you know, please God, everyone still be around. And thanks again for that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Spencer, for your time, and hopefully see you soon.
No problem, Don. Thanks. Take care.